Okay, cool.
Should I start?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, all of you. I'm Shubham Ghosh, a student in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Patna. And the topic of my today's presentation is problematizing heteronormativity in Sri Lanka, a study of Sham Salvadorai swimming in the monsoon sea and the hungry ghosts. So this is the brief outline of my presentation. So first, let's start with the author. Okay. So Sham Salvadorai was born in Colombo, Sri Lanka, to a Sinhalese mother and a Tamil father, who are members of two conflicting ethnic groups. Actually, this ethnic conflict forms a major theme in most of Salvadorai's works. And due to this ethnic riot in 1983, the whole Salvadorai family actually emigrated to Canada. And there Salvador wrote his first novel, The Funny Boy, which came out in the year 1994 and won the Canada First Novel Award. And the novels that I shall discuss here, Swimming in the Monsoon Sea, it was published in the year 2005, and it won the Lambda Literary Award in Children's and Youth Literature category in the year 2006. And it is basically about a little boy, as you know, Amrit, and his struggle in finding his true sexuality. And the latest novel, The Hungry Ghost, came out in the year 2013. It also, deals with the life of a homosexual protagonist, Shivan, who also refuses to give up before the heteronormative society. So, coming to the condition of heteronormativity in Sri Lanka. So, actually, the term heteronormativity refers to a system of valuing heterosexuality as a natural and normative sexual orientation, and thereby devaluing all other expressions of sexuality. Now, most of the people around us are heterosexuals and they do not have any problem with it. But there are many who cannot simply internalize these social norms and become victims of homophobic oppression. And talking about Sri Lanka in particular, it is one of those countries where homosexuality is banned legally. You will be strange to know that this history of criminalization is not very old. Actually, in pre-colonial times, homoerotic bondings were remarkably tolerant, and it has evidences in like local folklores and songs. But it is only after the colonization that the British forcefully implemented the Judeo-Christian values and criminalized sexuality. So otherwise, you can see homosocial bondings between men or between women is widespread and fully accepted in South Asian countries. The matter was actually complicated with the mixing of religious values with those of the imported values, therefore, even after the fall of the British Empire, it is still justified in the name of like local cultural values. So against this background, Salvadorai has created the protagonists like Amrit and Shivan, who are young, they are ignorant, they are confused, and of course, parallelly victims of heteronormativity. So these novels are actually meant to expose the biases of Sri Lankan society towards heterosexuals. Different attempts have been made to locate homosexuality in Mr. Salvadorai's novels, particularly in context of nationality or family. However, the main objective of my study here is first to look into the lives and struggles of the homosexuals in Sri Lanka, and second, the study also tries to find out any possibility of resistance or any improvement in the lives of these people. And in doing so, the study has been immensely influenced by by the theories of Judith Butler. And Judith Butler is the person who observed that the oppression and violence upon homosexuals are mostly caused by homophobic attitude of the society. She says, like I quote, the violence emerges from a profound desire to keep the order of binary gender natural or necessary, to make of it a structure either natural or cultural or both, that no human can oppose and still remain human. So queer theory states that people should not necessarily define themselves according to binary norms. Since gender is not fixed, it can be multiplied. So instead of demanding the abolition of gender, where people advocate for the multiplication of gender. And Judith Butler, in her famous book Undoing Gender, argues that both heterosexual and homosexual families should be available as options to people. But again, in order to execute this, the conservative society must change. Okay, so as we see in a heteronormative society, like the presence of gender non-conforming homosexual individuals disturb the hegemony of the male-female binary. And instead of being recognized as a different category, people having these same-sex desires are either ignored or forced to embrace one of the existing classifications in the society. And therefore, Butler again says, like, when we speak about sexual rights, we are not merely talking about rights that pertain to our individual desires, but to the norms on which our very individuality depends. Okay, so these theoretical arguments are well applicable with the socio-political condition of Sri Lanka also. And therefore, the questions that my study actually addresses are like how a country like Sri Lanka, which is open to globalization, still refuses to accept the homosexuals as fellow citizens, and how it actually feels to live in such a society. And there is the second question, that how the protagonist, those Amrit and Shivan, instead of succumbing to the heteronormative social order, tries to, proclaim their identities. So now coming to some of the major observations of my analysis. So first is the role of society. So yeah, society and family are constitute two of the most important catalysts in determining one's identity. And family and society may play an important role in defining one's identity or roots, but these never provide a neutral environment for identity development, particularly in context of Sri Lanka. So naturally, homosexuals are always expected to internalize heterosexual attitudes, failing to which they face profound identity crisis. And when they cannot successfully play the role they are expected by the heteronormative society, they keep themselves aloof from all sorts of associations. And while commenting upon the position of homosexuals in the heteronormative society, Butler says, like, to find that you are fundamentally unintelligible is to find that you have not yet achieved access to human, that no recognition is forthcoming because the norms by which recognition takes place are not in your favor. So in Salvador's novels, the protagonists are typically found to struggling to root themselves into their families or the society they belong to. The boys in the novels neither have friends in schools, nor do they find any emotional connection to their family members or society. In Swimming in the Monsoon Sea, that we see, Amrit was respected in his school for his acting, but he could never make any friend there. And on the other hand, like Shivan also in The Hungry Ghost was a bit grown up, although he had successfully figured out his sexual identity. The fear and anxiety made him alienated from everything else. So the next slide says about the role of family in the capitalist society, and family, which is considered to be the unit of society, is both celebrated and denigrated in the modern capitalist system. It is condemned for subjugating women and children, while it is celebrated for carrying forward the morals and values. So while understanding the machinery of the society, Ahmed writes, it is the narrative of coupling as the condition of reproduction of life, culture, and values that explain the slide in racist narratives, the fear of queerness, and the fear of miscegenation. So basically, reproduction and procreation are given the primary importance in family formation. And anything that comes in the way of reproduction is considered a threat to the nation or culture. Homosexuals are therefore not recognized as eligible to make their own families. And since family carries the cultural values, the homophobic society curbs the cultural norms by stigmatizing queer sexuality. The narratives here are framed and taught by the family members in such a way that homosexuals cannot help thinking of their sexuality as a matter of shame or sin. So according to S. Chatterjee, in Sri Lanka, too many LGBT students find it hard to speak up about harassment because it is so embedded in a culture. LGBT harassment is one of the last forms of harassment that is still allowed in popular culture. So for this reason, you may note that Amrit feels profound shame with the change of his body. So yeah, like homophobia here is so deeply rooted in society that school-going children even become the victim of it. According to Althusser, school is one of the ideological state apparatuses that teaches know how, but in forms which ensure subjugation to the ruling ideology or the mastery of its practice. It is that crucial space where, through the transmission of controlled knowledge, heteronormative social orders are naturalized and individuals' brains are trained under it. So therefore, a boy who is differently inclined like Amrit is often bullied by other children like Suraj. And there is a quote that I have taken, like where Suraj says, Michael Cassio, waiting for your darling Iago to pick you up. So as we all know that ideally a school is supposed to be a place, I mean, where students are encouraged to deconstruct vicious norms and traditions, but still it cannot ignore the influence of society and the state. And Sri Lanka, being a heteronormative society, tries to homogenize heterosexuality by stigmatizing homosexuality through its educational system. And
What about 2 minutes?
Yeah, like, yeah, sure. Sorry, yeah. Now coming to the legal situation of Sri Lanka. So as you know that when militant nationalism takes over a country, it can scarcely focus on issues like minority rights and queer subordination. So both the novels under discussion here have been written against the background of 1970s, 1980s Sri Lanka, when the country was going through the ethnic war. And in such a time, homosexuality comes in a vulnerable position, and it is very difficult to articulate queer rights in a time of national and political crisis. So yeah, my point is basically is to say that only a peaceful democratic space is suitable for raising the demands of queer rights. So that is why you can see in The Hungry Ghosts, Shriyani, who is a human rights activist, she, instead of supporting Shivan, she requests him to think about his decision. She reminds her of the law and says, you know, there is still a law here, 10 years in jail, not just for getting caught in the act, but for actually being so inclined. Okay, so yeah, this shows how the situation is really in Sri Lanka. And why is it not changing? Yeah, so now coming to the conclusion, one may ask, is there any hope? So the answer is, of course, yes. And this is hinted in the novel also. In spite of all the difficulties, the boys fight back. They opt to maintain their sexual identities rather than conforming to the heteronormative social systems. According to Minton and Matson, this was the turning point of their stories. So Shivan, in The Hungry Ghost, following his partner's death, decides to live the country instead of his sexuality. And Amrit also, in Swimming in the Monsoon Sea, understands everything about his sexual inclination and decides only to reveal it in a suitable situation. And to talk about Sri Lanka particularly, the situation is obviously improving, especially after the war. More people are coming out to claim their sexual identities, but still the people have a long way to go. So these are some of the references, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Excellent. I have too many reactions on my screen. Let me make those go away. All right, let's see. Next, we have, next we have Faith. All right, let me get your bio up here. Let's see. Faith Boyd is currently a PhD student in film and media studies at the University of Florida. Her research interests include film adaptations, film genres, and queer/feminist theory.
All right, thank you so much. Let's see, I'm going to share my screen as well. And for this, I'm gonna have to do, let's see, pause while I get this set up. Let's see. And I apologize for any echo. I didn't think to bring my AirPods. Okay, so are you able to see the PowerPoint? Okay, awesome. Okay, so my presentation today is called The Queer Possibilities of Disorientation in Claire Denis' Beautify. Oops, there we go. Okay, since the release of her debut film, Chocolat, in 1988, French filmmaker Claire Denis has cultivated a diverse and eclectic oeuvre, ranging from a slow-burning science fiction feature to a romantic comedy to several films reflecting on post-colonial Africa. However, critics and scholars have noted both formal and thematic qualities connecting her films, such as the privileging of image over narrative, a visual emphasis on the human body and its movements, the expression and repression of primarily sexual desire, and the exploration of identity, community, and alienation. Okay. Arguably, these stylistic and thematic conventions first successfully cohered in her 1999 film Beautify. A loose adaptation of Herman Melville's Billy Budd, Beautify follows Chief Master Sergeant Galou as he reflects on the events that ended in his eviction from the French Foreign Legion station in Djibouti, an eviction tied to his continued antagonism toward a new recruit, Gilles Satan, who attracted the attention of the commandant and the other legionnaires. Similar to Melville's novella, Beautify has a notable homoerotic undercurrent stemming from the homosocial triangle at the story's center and further emphasized by the film's lingering gaze on the legionnaires' bodies. Despite its undertones, however, few scholars have devoted work to discussing how queerness informs the film. Instead, conversation tends to focus on its critique of France's colonialist present, the complexities of masculinity, or the community of the French Foreign Legion itself. In response to this lack of commentary, I will consider Beautify's narrative and aesthetic queerness, analyzing how this in turn complicates and complements previous discussions of identity, community, and alienation. Using primarily Sarah Ahmed's work on queer orientation as a foundation, I argue that Denis' concentration on male bodies, as well as the juxtaposition of choreographed exercises against eruptions of uninhibited movement, mark Beautify as a queer film. As such, Beautify complicates traditional notions of community and reveals the possibilities and risks that appear when one experiences disorientation. So Beautify originated as a commission for the television series Foreign Lands. In describing the film's pre-production, Denis states that the word foreign inspired the film, leading her to Djibouti and then the French Foreign Legion. A branch of the French Armed Forces, the French Foreign Legion is open to men outside of French descent. However, despite the consequent variety of men serving in the Legion as a result of this, the differences between the individual legionnaires are elided. Denis explains that during Beautify's production in Djibouti, she could actually identify a legionnaire easily, saying, "I could tell who was a legionnaire and who wasn't. You can always tell. The way of shaving, the way of holding the neck in the shirt, the way of standing, the stature. All the legionnaires stand in the same way. They have a way of being grounded, not by puffing out the chest, not at all. It's more subtle than that. They have a strong rapport with the body and so want to show it to others." Even with the Legion's diverse ethnic and cultural makeup, those outside of the Legion can recognize legionnaires based off of their shared physicality. Denis' awareness and consequent visualization of the similarities between legionnaires correspond to Sarah Ahmed's conceptualization of orientation. In Queer Phenomenology, Orientations, Objects, Others, Ahmed connects phenomenology and contemporary queer studies through the concept of orientation. She argues that orientation, quote, is not so much about the relation between objects that extend into space, rather, orientation depends on the bodily inhabitants of that space, end quote. Essentially, orientation, as Ahmed describes it, is about, quote, how we come to feel at home, end quote. So according to Ahmed, This can arise from social relationships, familiarity in an environment, and the repetition of certain actions, all of which produce the feeling of being at home. As Ahmed's conception of orientation relates to Beautify, the Legionnaires are firmly oriented through their familiarity with one another in both physical and social spaces. So the Legionnaires' similarities not only demonstrate their shared orientation, but also indicate what Ahmed terms the sociality of lines. She explains that communities and collectives exist by following lines and repeating certain actions, which establish, quote, who is and is not in a given collective. She continues, quote, it may be the very act of attention, of attending to or facing this or that direction or toward this or that object that produces a sense of a collective or a social group. In other words, by repeating the same actions and by following the same lines set out before them, these collectives create a sense of community. They are linked by their shared goals, their shared actions, their shared forms. Denis visualizes the sociality of lines in a sequence called the routine, which depicts a Legionnaire training exercise. The sequence begins with a high-angle shot of an unnamed Legionnaire crawling underneath rows of barbed wire. The following shot features another Legionnaire repeating the same action, which is then followed by another shot of a Legionnaire repeating the same action, and so on. So I actually have a brief excerpt from this sequence, which runs for a couple of minutes, but this is, a few seconds. Oops, sorry. Okay, I wanted to end it there. So as we saw, the sequence displays several exercises running across balance beams, climbing ladders, ducking hurdles, showing Legionnaires repeating the same action while refusing to highlight the identifying markers of the individual Legionnaires. So using Ahmed's sociality of lines, the routine acts as a shaping device for the Legionnaires' bodies, creating a sense of community by following the same directions and repeating the same actions. Even the sequence's audio reaffirms the sense of a collective. As the Legionnaires race through the obstacle course, an unidentified male voice sings an a cappella version of Sous le soleil brûlant d'Afrique, the French Foreign Legion's march song. The disembodied voice implies that it could be any of the Legionnaires. As they repeat the same actions and follow the same lines set before them, they become one of the unidentifiable components of the collective. Despite the orienting actions in which the Legionnaires engage, Beautify's central tension arises from disorientation, which emerges out of the repression and relocation of desire. In queer phenomenology, Ahmed describes disorientation as an unsettling. It can, quote, shatter one's sense of confidence in the ground or one's belief that the ground on which we reside can support the actions that make a life feel livable, end quote. Essentially, disorientation disappears the familiarity, the feeling at home that orientation provides. Through his voiceover, Galou expresses a similar feeling upon the arrival of a young Legionnaire, Gilles Satan. As he explains, quote, I noticed one of them who stuck out. He had no reason to be with us in the Legion, end quote. For Galou, Satan's arrival disrupts his feeling at home in the Legion. In other words, he represents what Ahmed calls an unsettling arrival. In Galou's eyes, Satan does not fit within the Legion. Thus, he's upsetting the familiar social space. Rather, Satan's arrival draws attention to Galou's own detachment from the group, while also inspiring his disruptive actions. As other scholars have noted, it is Galou's desire for and jealousy of Satan that subsequently marks Galou as separate. So it's his suppressed desire that fuels the disorienting tension at the center of the film. So let's see. Okay, so I'm gonna cut a couple of things. Although Galou feels an attachment to the Legion, his desires do not align with its collective goals, essentially to maintain and reproduce the Legion. As Ahmed explains, a community, which he refers to as the family, becomes, quote, an allegiance in the sense of the desire to continue its line, whereby such allegiance is also to be aligned with others, or even to side with others who have also taken the family as their ego ideal, end quote. Instead of desiring the desires of the family, Galou works to fulfill his own desires, to remove Satan and recover the admiration of the commandant and the other legionnaires. In refusing to realize the legion's desires, Galou represents a death threat, or what Ahmed also calls, quote, the threat of the queer. Although the desires are not expressly homoerotic or homosexual, Galou's desires and subsequent actions result in the interruption of the family line, the reproduction of the legion. Instead of maintaining the legion's equalizing effect, Galou purposefully individualizes the legionnaires, particularly Satan, which leads to the legionnaires' own disorientation. Okay, so while at the beginning of the film, Galou attempts to socially separate Satan from the legion, the film ends with his physical separation from the group. As a punishment for helping a fellow legionnaire and for physically attacking Galou, Galou strands Satan in the desert, forcing him to return back to the base on his own with a broken compass as his only orientation device. Through his separation from the legion, as well as his reliance on a damaged compass, Satan becomes disoriented in both a social and spatial sense. However, Denis does not necessarily cast his disorientation in a negative light. Instead, his experiences reflect Ahmed's argument about the queer possibilities of disorientation. She explains that disorientation can offer, quote, the hope for new directions. It can offer the possibility for new lines or new communities to emerge. For Satan, possibility appears as a caravan that rescues him from the coast of Lake Assal. They transport him to safety and care for his ailing body. Although Satan was first lost while incapacitated, the local Djiboutians' assistance acts as a reorientation device. By placing him on a minibus that moves away from the Legion space, the caravan represents the possibilities for new directions and new collectives.
About 2 minutes left.
Okay. Let's see. While Satan's disorienting moment ends in the possibility of new collectives, Galou's resolution is arguably more pessimistic. Although Galou anticipates that his actions against Satan will restore his sense of orientation, it does the opposite. He is fired from his position and court-martialed. Unlike Satan, who, quote, finds something to steady his action in a moment of disorientation, Galou reaches out and finds nothing. In France, he cannot readjust to his new environment. He explains that his body no longer works properly, his muscles are rusty. As Ahmed argues, the repetition of actions shapes the contours of the body. Our body takes the shape of this repetition. We get stuck in certain alignments as the effect of this work. Similarly, Galou's body has become adjusted to the movements and routines of the Legion, thus he cannot imagine possibilities outside of his past orientation. This crushing realization, his separation from a community that provided him support and a lack of present direction for his life, builds to Galou's final action. At the end of the film, he makes his bed according to the Legion's training. He then lies on his bed, a pistol in his hands, and his last words, serve the good cause and die, suggest that reorientation will not follow this moment of disorientation. Oops. However, the film does not end on his suicide. Instead, Denis includes a sequence that opens a space for potential reorientation. As he lies in bed contemplating his suicide, the camera moves up his body, lingering on his arm, specifically a vein pulsing rhythmically. As the camera remains focused on his vein, pop group Corona's The Rhythm of the Night begins to play, and the next shot is set in a Djibouti nightclub that was featured periodically throughout the film. Oh, sorry. Essentially, what happens is he's alone, he dances, uninhibited. It's really, incredible. So, oops, sorry. Overall, I'm just suggesting that Galou's ending is a possibility for reorientation, or at least kind of a different reorientation in a way. So, all right, sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. Thank you. All right, next we have, I think we're doing all right on time, everybody. We're supposed to be done at 9 and it's only 8:20. Good. Next, we have, wait a sec. Wow, we're doing really good on time. Is Sonihi here? I guess not. We have a lot of time left. if anybody wants to go and finish any points that they didn't get to, I think we could allow 5 minutes more for everybody. If you want to show the clip of the crazy dancing, that might get the point across. Let's start with that. Let's continue with that.
Okay, great.
That scene was nuts.
I know, it's really, yeah, I'm a big fan. Okay, so let me get my screen shared. Okay. Oops. I'm gonna pause that. Okay, so yeah, so I have it set up. It's coming from his potential suicide to kind of a dance sequence that I find interesting. Okay, so yeah, juxtaposed against his measured actions in the previous sequence where he's setting everything up, as well as in the choreographed exercises throughout the film, this dance, I think, represents a physicalized disorientation. So all alone in this nightclub that's usually filled with bodies, he exists without social support. And as Ahmed notes, a disoriented body that loses support quote, might then be lost, undone, thrown. So his frenzied, unmotivated dance moves could very well be described as a throwing of the body or an expression of disorientation's effects on the body. However, Denis states that she placed the dance sequence at the end of the film because she, quote, wanted to give the sense that Galoo could escape himself. So perhaps then his dance illustrates the possibilities of disorientation. Contrasted against the Legion's highly regimented routines, his dance represents his release of past orientations, as well as an embrace of queer possibilities provided by disorientation. And so I'll do a quick conclusion. But overall, Beautify, I think, stands as a very impressive work and an amalgamation of her narrative, Denis' narrative and stylistic interest, particularly through its examination of community, exclusion, and foreignness. In its interrogation of these themes as they relate to the French Foreign Legion, the film demonstrates queerness, and essentially I'm just arguing that Beautify's queerness appears as a result of its visual and narrative handling of disorientation and its juxtaposition of orientation against moments of disorientation. It provides space for queer possibilities. According to Ahmed, everyone experiences disorientation at some point. However, what's queer about it is that it can, quote, offer us the hope of new directions. So Beautify visualizes the positive and sometimes ambivalent queerness of disorientation and offers ways to respond to the experience, whether through the release of a damaging past or the creation of new lines and new collectives. Okay, thank you.
Great, very good. Because you stopped sharing. Okay, great, awesome. I have questions for the presenters. Does anybody else have any questions they want to ask first? I'm trying to learn how to wait and give people time to think about their questions. You have 20 seconds to think.
I don't have any question. Uh, I was very nervous. I don't know. I may look a bit confident, but inside I'm very nervous. And I'm just waiting for your suggestions and feedbacks, and yeah, like this.
Yeah, everybody was fantastic. That was delightful. I'll go first then. Okay, so Garaji, I love your topic and I loved your presentation. That was so good. Do you feel like in the newer vlogs by the women, cyberspace has become a more positive space for them?
Definitely, yes. I mean,
That's-
yeah, I mean, it was a very toxic space for them, very toxic space. So right now the situation is like, if somebody might by mistake also, if they comment, something which sexually objectifies a trans body, the public suddenly comes and even before somebody from the community comes and speak against them, the public, the cisgender mainstream public, somebody would come and give proper answer. It has come to that situation, and I think I should mention this. Uh, Many trans women, especially, have been killed or murdered in my state previously, in very brutal conditions. It has happened many times, and the community members would come up and speak against it, and they would do protests. But nobody else never minded. But last I think 2 months ago, an unfortunate incident happened. A trans woman who, like, she committed suicide, and there was a public uproar. Everybody came together, and that thing happened just because of these vlogs. The woman who committed suicide was very familiar for the public through these vlogs, and it was as I told you, it's a familiar system to which all the community members are being attached to each other. So they had lost their sister, and all of them were in so much pain, and they were not in a mental status to come forward and fight at that time. They were crying at that time. It was this same cisgender section of people who came forward to fight, and then the trans community was coming forward. That's how it happened. I mean, an action was taken immediately. uh, Actually, she committed suicide because of a failed SRS surgery. She had undergone a solution surgery, but still it failed, and it was because of the doctor and the hospital. It was their irresponsibility which caused her caused this issue. And yeah, the public came forward, and the government had to take actions. Previously, in previous cases, such actions would be delayed a while, but the government had to take action on the same day of her death, even after a few hours. So in my state, such a change is that too within a short period of time means it's really big thing, and the whole credit goes to the community. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Feel free to pop in if anybody has any comments or questions. Shubham, when you were presenting, I had a realization about Lucian Lamage, was that his name? In the Monsoon Sea, the architect. Can you speak to his connection?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Lucian.
Can you speak to his connection as an architect in his traditional style, and maybe like his sexual identity?
Not exactly. I have not given that thought, but yeah, Lucian is a person that represents basically the homosexual community that is oppressed there in Sri Lanka. And Lucian is a person who is like he doesn't care about all this. He roams around with men surrounded, and he's like yeah, he doesn't care about the law as well. So Yeah, right. There is the instance like when the Uncle Lucky says that Amrit should not mix with this guy because it may cause any legal action and it will be harmful for Amrit only. So yeah, Lucian is a character that attracts us.
Yes.
Yeah.
The old dandy. Yeah, I liked him. I was noticing when you were talking that he's super into traditional styles of architecture, and he builds traditional Sri Lankan houses, which is so
Yeah,
cool.
right.
I feel like his connection to that specific pre-colonial style connects him and his identity
Yes,
as a gay man, you know, to pre-colonial.
Yeah,
you know,
thank you very much for your insight. Yeah, right. This this I hadn't thought, and I really appreciate.
Yeah, you may have seen me
Thank you very much.
making faces during your talk,
Yeah,
thinking of it myself.
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's great. So good. Faith, that was a crazy movie. I had 2 friends watch it with me so they could help me understand what was going on. It was so French. It reminded me of watching the 60s new wave stuff. Yeah, crazy. Something that I noticed a lot was the visual motif of like a cage, which actually is like what's behind you right now. Did you choose that because that's like in the film a lot? Okay, there's a lot of like fences, the chain link fences, and for me in the ending sequence, the mirror is even making that that pattern. And I was like, so I read it as like he is still enchained, but maybe it's like he's so nearer to his own cage that like his dancing is him breaking free.
Yeah, I find that a really interesting reading. I definitely noticed the, fence motif throughout the like training exercises or when they're stationed in Djibouti. And then he talks so much about how he feels kind of like trapped in his own body in a way too, or kind of like caged in, like he can't move very much, or he can't even really exist in France anymore because of his, past. As he says, he's like unfit for even civil life at this point. I didn't read the mirror in that same motif, but I, totally do now. I think that definitely complicates that ending dance even more than it already is. It's such an odd.
It's so crazy.
It is. Yeah. No, I'll have to sit and think on that reading. I think that's really, really interesting.
I hope I didn't ruin the ending for you.
No, you're totally fine. I'm always very like moved by the ending for some reason. It's very cathartic, but
it disturbed me so much. I was
really?
like, what's crazy, man? His dance.
I know, but it adds, kind of a layer of sadness to think of it that way. I think that's an interesting reading for sure.
Mm-hmm. Do you know the Jean-Luc Godard film? The translation is The Detestation. L'amour près. I'm making that up. It also happens somewhere where there's like really, really far away shots and scenes on the sea and like bare mountains, like extremely going directly into the sea. That's the one. Yes, Jean-Luc Godard. I can't say his name. I'm sorry. Flora's laughing at me. Do you know the film name? Okay. So, but the whole
I have
thing,
to look it up. Like, can you write it down in English and I can have a look? Because obviously
I think it's called Le Mépris.
I say it was translated as devastation, something like that.
Detestation.
Detestation.
Like you detest something. Contempt. That's the one. Yes, somebody knows it. I misremembered it. Yeah, is that Le Mépris? Is that what it's called? Yes, somebody says yes. Okay, thank you, Alan. But it has similar like shots going on. And the whole theme is also confusing, like very, very minimal scripts, I think, just like in this Beautify. So sorry about my French accent. Like there were like 20 lines total. And it was just so cold and like cut off from everything. Yeah, thank you, Alan, doing all of these Google searches, getting the names of the film. Yes. Anyway, those are my thoughts about the film. Anybody have any questions? You're not out of here yet.
I have another observation. Yeah, since you just connected Lucian's profession with his identity, so I just thought about another thing, like the three children, that is Amrit, Selvi, and Mala. So if you see that while they went to church for the prayers, it is only Amrit and Mala who were the mischievous, who were inattentive. And Amrit and Selvi, and Mala was the third one who was attentive, and she was actually heterosexual, I mean gender conforming.
Yeah.
And Amrit was a non-conforming. Selvi was a tomboy, you can say. So basically their defiance for the religious rituals also like symbolize their defiance for the Christian value of stigmatizing the homosexuality also. I just thought it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's good. That's really cool. Yeah, it was so interesting how religion played a part. In, I mean, I'm Lutheran, but I hate the horrible things that Christianity has done in the world, just like imposing on other people and wrecking the culture. It's terrible. And it aggravates me to see the way that the British Empire's beliefs still affect countries to this day, when in their original culture these things were not a problem, and it's all about control and horrible things like empire.
This is simply, I think, political stance, because the political persons as well do not want to abolish these things. Like in 2017 in Sri Lankan parliament, there was a, I mean, huge debate upon whether to do away with these laws or not, and eventually it was not taken back. So yeah.
This goes to Garji too. Is it commonly known that before the British Empire, oh, Felipe has a question. I'll make my question quick. Is it commonly known that it was okay to be gay before the British Empire, or do people kind of deny their own history?
Are you asking about queer and transgender context, or generally? Yeah,
generally queer identity before the British Empire.
Well, in terms of homosexuality, yes, we had, our ancestors used to accept it. I mean, it was acceptable. But when it comes to transgender bodies, there is it becomes a little complex, because yes, we had another space, a non-binary space. We always had it, but that space was quite complicated, because if you see, as in every culture, India also, we also have, we also give a lot of importance to family system and reproduction and stuff. So transgenders, as I said, we have a lot of indigenous communities. So it was believed that they are bestowed with the power to bless others with fertility. Okay, it's a kind of divinization of somebody, and this divinization process happens through denying their sexual feelings or sexual desires. It's like a transgender person is supposed to be ascetic. Okay, like Hijra, she has some divine power to bless others. I mean, when see, I'm using the term emasculation itself because that's how it was done. It was a ritualistic process. not a proper surgery as we have in modern times now. So it was, it was just ritualistically cutting the part. So when you do that, you are basically sacrificing your fertility to goddess Bahujara Mata, and there are a lot of gods. So after that, you are supposed to be, you're not supposed to be getting married or have a sexual life or anything like that. So it's a kind of, I don't know what kind of acceptance is that. Okay, so technically in ancient India, this is how the transgender body was accepted. Um, they were not considered as normal. That marginalization was always there. Yeah, that's how it was. And only in the ritual spaces, or the hijra gharanas, or this kinds of blessings, places where people go around and bless, only in such spaces this acceptance was there. Once if you come out of that space, then marginalization will be there. I mean, respect won't be given. It was like that, and still it's like that. Still now too, it's been complicated. Like there are two divisions within the community, and it is hierarchical. One group of hijras are called badai hijras, means the hijras who earn money through blessing people. The other section of people are called, their work is like. They do sex work to earn money. So see the binary: either you can be an ascetic person who completely denies your sexual desires, and otherwise you are supposed to be a sex worker, or otherwise you can go and beg. They call it as shoppings. Going to shops and begging is called shopping, like shop plus begging. So that's why it is being done. So yes, we do have the space, but it's quite complicated. There's a temple nearby my home, so there are ritualistic practices, like there are some festivals in which the men, like even if they are heterosexual, sorry, even if they're cisgender or transgender, when they attend that festival, they are supposed to dress like a woman, even cisgender men. So that's a rule. So in such spaces, it is allowed. I mean, and also in the spaces of entertainment, like drama, this ritualistic dramas and stuff. So the acceptance was always, it always came with rules and regulations and stuff. And now also there is a line of thought on transgender bodies in India, led by the transgender community itself. There is one trans woman. She's a very famous activist. Her name is Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi. So she leads this ascetic notion. I mean, she's kind of the head of one of Akhada. Akhada means an ascetic group of hijras. I mean, they try to reassert their traditional position as the priest or priestess. They believe that that is the only way a hijra or a transgender can achieve the true power. So that's how the movement is going on. Wow, so that's what there was a space always, but it was quite complicated. And but when it comes to homosexuality, yeah, the sexual desire was kind of accepted only. But yeah, during the colonization only, what happened was like when this transgender persons, they live as a community. We have a fictive kinship system for them. There are sisters and mothers, grandmothers. They kind of create a parallel family system. So that's they live in that structure. So I lost the track of it.
Yeah, that does an awesome explanation. Thank you.
Okay,
Felipe has a question. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I have a question for Shubham. I don't know if Shubham is here still.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. So I'm wondering, given that you wonder whether there is hope in Sri Lanka for a, let's say, counter-heteronormative future, could you talk more about the role of novels, the novels that you discussed, and literature more in general to enable a more hopeful future?
Actually, the novels are presenting the real situation of Sri Lanka. Shyam Salvadurai was himself born in Sri Lanka and then migrated to Canada. So he has the first-hand experience of how the life of homosexuals are. So in the novels, he only presents the reality, and the beauty that I feel like in Salvador's novel is that he doesn't make the characters submissive. So Amrit, for example, is a shy guy, but again, when you see like in the Sinhalese lexicon, there is no word for homosexuals. There are different words like they say it's some kind of strangeness. They say some kind of they use a word punaya. Punaya is like just uh, uh, how can I say? It is not particularly homosexual, but it means like bringing a male down to a position of female. So like you are like very female. So often that person Lucian also was called a punaya, but there is not a particular term for homosexuality. So Amrit, if you see like Amrit doesn't agree with it. So he simply doesn't agree with it, and he just goes to his mother's grave. His mother was dead, so he just goes to his mother's grave, and he has to confess his sexuality to his mother, and he doesn't have any word, but he refuses to use the word punaya. So he says that, "Mom, I am different." Nothing else, but I am different. So this is what Salvador creates. Like again, if you see in the second one, the Hungry Ghosts, Shivan had the friend Millie. He was actually his school friend. So in his adulthood, he falls in love with Millie. They plan to live together, but due to this societal pressure, and Millie eventually gets killed, gets murdered, and there is strangely no action is taken by the police also. So Shivan was devastated, but Shivan was resolute, not to live his sexuality. So he leaves his country instead. He moves to Canada, where it was legal. So yeah, this is like I think they are, if I may, like if I may say that Shivan and Amrit are the representatives of the gay community in Sri Lanka. So they never fail us. I mean, they never give any hint like giving up. They always try to resist something. And in reality as well, there are people who are coming out. There are some NGOs, like there is a very famous group. The name is Equal Grounds. Yeah, if you search the name Equal Grounds, there is the group who actually talk about, who actually raise their voices for those suppressed homosexuals in Sri Lanka. So yeah, I think these are the positive things. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Catherine, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. So first of all, I wanted to say great job, everyone. I really enjoyed everybody's presentations. But my question is for you, Gargi. When you were talking about the familial structures and the familial systems of the Hijras, I kept thinking of the character of Anjum from Arundhati Roy's The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. I don't know if you've read that text or not, but there's these extensive scenes where Anjum creates like her own world of fellow Hijras within, I think it's the Kwabga, the House of Dreams. And I was just wondering if you had either read that text and knew of that character, and whether that character, if her depiction of the house she created, or the house that she joined with the fellow Hijras, if you could talk a little bit about the the physical familial arrangements and structures of the hijras.
Definitely, but let me tell you one thing. I haven't read the book, sorry, but I can add another thing. When the book was released, the Hijra community members from India they were against the book because the characterization was the protagonist was not. It was quite complex. It was quite problematic. It seems. I mean, the community members claimed that the writer Arundhati Roy didn't even she have created that character without enough research on the identity of the community members. It's like she is through the protagonist's eyes. The protagonist is a transgender character, and through the protagonist's eyes, Arundhati is viewing Indian politics. I think that's a scenario, but the book was not well received by the community members. They what they said was like she's confusing between transgender and Hijra and there are other different communities. So she's confusing between all these communities and gender, sexuality, like basic concepts. She's confusing. So the community members were actually against it. I think there are articles on this in Google. If you try, you might get it.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, thank you for that.
I'm really sorry I haven't read the book. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, fine.
I wanted to comment that the person who was also going to present, who hasn't come today, was going to talk about a wonderful film called The Flute Player, Nagar Kirtan, which was really great, an Indian film about a young Hijra woman and her romance with a traditional flute player. And it was very good. And if you can find it, I would watch it. I want to make sure we leave time to do the election thing. Does anybody have any other questions for our panelists? Let me look at my own notes and see if I had any. Faith, when I was watching the film, it gave me like a really strong sense of kind of like alienation or something. And I think that was probably meant to make me feel like, what is his name? Galoo. It was probably meant to make me feel like him. Yeah, it's hard to explain because I don't know very much about visual arts, but yeah, could you speak to more of maybe like this, what cinematography made me feel like that?
Yeah, so I had a couple of shots in my PowerPoint, but I think you're right on. He's often, him as an character, the way that he's shot in the film is very alienating or very isolating throughout most of it. There's a sequence where oh my gosh, it's him and a bunch of legionnaires in a boat, like just kind of on the ocean. And it's a bunch of close-ups and medium close-ups of these really young, attractive, like shirtless legionnaires. And they're all facing like, even just like kind of their orientation in the shots, they're all facing the left side of the frame. But when it cuts to him, he's fully clothed, he's, older, kind of pockmarked. And even there, he's kind of just facing the opposite direction. So it's almost like kind of a very subtle, delineation between them, or it's like marking him as different. And I'm sure too, part of that has to do with his status as a chief master surgeon versus not, but he's often filmed alone in crowded streets, or whereas the others are typically together. So yeah, no, I definitely feel that sense. And then of course, the legionnaires in general throughout the film are, as you pointed to earlier, kind of enclosed in their own encampment. Very rarely do they go out into the town and interact with the people in the town in which they're residing too, which I think that distance, you can kind of feel it throughout the film. So, yeah.
Well, I think we should do the election thing. Has anybody been to one of these before? Last time I did was like 2 years ago. So the last time I went to one of these, there was just kind of a general, does anybody want to be the presiding officer for this? And me and another guy raised our hands, and I gave like a maybe, and he gave a maybe, and then he dropped out and I got the position, and it's been really delightful. It was horrible to have to say no to some people, but getting to say yes to you people and hearing your wonderful papers was great. Is anybody else interested in being contacted if I can't do it next year? With a maybe, anybody got a maybe like I did?
Like, would you mind to explain what exactly we have to do? Like, basically, you have to organize a panel about queer studies and like this kind of stuff. Okay.
So Craig will send you, as you know, a lot of emails, but he sends an email at the proper time of year telling you the things you will need to do as a presiding officer. I raised my hand, I had no idea what I was doing, and Craig was there to help me with any questions I had. So basically, he can even provide you with a sample call for papers. And so you'll take that and he'll suggest 3 or 5 places where you should post the call for papers. And then you'll get submissions. I think I had 16 total. So I had to say no to 8, and then we split it into 2 sessions of 4. And you read everybody's abstracts. I didn't read anybody's papers here. I just read the abstracts and had to choose which ones that seemed like they were on point, and these were all great. And let's see. So it's not like a weekly commitment. It's not a monthly commitment. It's like every few months you have a task that you have to put a few hours into doing. You know, and it's volunteer, but it was really an honor. Yeah, if anybody's interested, could I get your email? Is that a sure for Shubham? Your sound is off.
No.
It's a no from you. A lot of you, how many of you all are in degrees right now? Anybody doing a PhD?
Yeah, PhD.
That makes sense.
I'm in the final year of my PhD. I mean, by next year I'll be in the final year. So I think I'll be.
I'm in the first year.
Yeah, and I'm about to start one next year.
Also, another concern is, will it be an in-person session? I mean, we may have to go there, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be next year.
Yeah. So I don't think so. In the final year of PhD, I will be.
Yeah, crazy busy.
Yeah.
I think it is in LA. Yes. Well, I still have another panel that I can ask, and it was an honor to do it myself. So I'm happy to preside again. Cool. Very good. Where's everybody coming from today? I'm in Seattle.
I'm in Las Vegas.
Oh, great.
I'm in Montreal, Canada.
St. Louis, Missouri.
Wow.
Northern California, foothills.
Very good. The people in Vegas, are you there for the conference or are you from Vegas?
Here for the conference. I've never been to Vegas, so
yeah. Very good. I hope it's been good. Cool. Well, this was a really delightful panel. Thank you for all of your work on your research, everybody. Tell you what, this is such meaningful research. Every time I come to one of these panels, I feel like it's so meaningful to have people be doing this. Thank you again. I think I'll let you all go. I'm talking at the next one about Dorian Gray and music. If anybody likes Oscar Wilde and wants to hear me speed through a paper. Anybody else here presenting a paper who was just in the audience today? Yes, Flora will be the next one. Catherine, what are you presenting on?
I'm presenting in the second Beyond Binaries panel. on queer futures and BDSM studies in Ocean Vuong's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous and Jeremy O. Harris's Slave Play.
Wow. If you can make it to the other queer studies one, somebody's going to talk about this book, which is kind of like, do you know this book? You're giving a nod.
No.
It's really good. It's like short stories on an anthology of two-spirit and indigiqueer speculative fiction, love after the end. It's about, it's like about the apocalypse. It's really good. Yeah. Yes. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. I'll let you go on to your break or your next session, and let's keep in touch. See ya.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.